Okay, so today we're diving into the world of hemp extracts, and specifically CBD distillate.
That's good.
It seems like CBD is everywhere these days,
Yeah.
but I have to admit it can be a little overwhelming trying to navigate it all, with all the different product types and jargon.
Yeah, definitely. It's a rapidly growing field, and it can be a lot to wrap your head around.
It really can.
Yeah.
So to help us unpack it all, we've got a ton of information from hempex.com, including details from their website and a really detailed briefing document.
Excellent.
So we'll be digging into all of that, figuring out what's interesting, what's worth knowing, and what it all means for you, the listener.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
So CBD distillate, what exactly are we talking about here when we say CBD distillate?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head with this deep dive. The interest in hemp-derived products, especially CBD, has just exploded in recent years. But you're right, it can feel like navigating a maze of jargon and options. So let's start with the heart of it all, CBD distillate. Essentially, it's a highly refined form of hemp extract, often starting with CBD-rich hemp flower. Think of it like this. You're taking something that's already potent, and then you're concentrating its essence even further.
Okay, so we're talking about a concentrated dose of CBD here, but I'm noticing on the Hempex website they mention different types of CBD distillate something about varying THC levels. Can you shed some light on that?
Absolutely, and this is where it gets interesting, even if you think you know your CBD. You see, while CBD itself doesn't get you high, it's important to remember that hemp naturally contains a variety of what are called cannabinoids, including small amounts of THC. And this is where the legal landscape comes into play. In the U.S., thanks to the 2018 Farm Bill, hemp-derived products are legal as long as they contain less than 0.3% THC. And Hempex actually emphasizes this quite a bit in their materials.
So how does this THC percentage play into the different types of CBD distillate they offer?
Well, you've got full-spectrum CBD distillate, which, as the name suggests, retains the full spectrum of cannabinoids found naturally in the hemp plant, including those trace amounts of THC, all within the legal limit, of course. Then there's THC-free CBD distillate. As you might guess, this means the THC has been completely removed through additional processing, making it a popular choice for those who want to avoid THC altogether, like athletes who are subject to rigorous drug testing.
Makes sense.
And then finding itself somewhere in between, you have broad-spectrum CBD distillate. This type contains a range of cannabinoids, but most of the THC has been removed.
So it's like a spectrum of THC inclusion, full spectrum with all the cannabinoids, including THC, broad spectrum with most of the THC removed, and THC-free with, well, no THC. That actually clears things up quite a bit. And I'm seeing on Hempex's site, they're really pushing the broad spectrum option, even talking about custom formulations.
That's a really interesting point, and it speaks to a growing trend in the CBD market: personalization and targeted effects. Hempex even highlights their ability to work with specific minor cannabinoids, essentially tailoring the distillate for a particular need or experience.
Custom formulations, that's intriguing. But before we dive deeper into that, you mentioned something earlier about an entourage effect. And I have to admit that piqued my curiosity.
Ah, yes, the entourage effect. It's a term that often raises eyebrows.
Yeah.
But it's rooted in some fascinating science, even if it sounds a bit mystical at first glance.
So what exactly is the entourage effect, and why should we care?
Well, it revolves around the idea that the various compounds in hemp, including cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids, work together in synergy. It's like an orchestra. Each instrument contributes to the overall harmony and creates a richer, more complex sound than any single instrument could achieve alone.
So instead of just isolating CBD, a full spectrum product, for example, would theoretically provide a more well-rounded experience due to this entourage effect.
Precisely. Proponents of the entourage effect argue that the combined efforts of these compounds lead to enhanced therapeutic benefits compared to isolated CBD on its own.
That makes sense. It's like how a good meal is about the combination of flavors, not just one ingredient in isolation. So we've got full spectrum with the entourage effect, THC-free for those avoiding THC entirely, and broad spectrum somewhere in between. And then there's the option for custom formulations. It seems like Hempex is covering all the bases here. But what does this actually look like in terms of products? How are they using CBD distillate? And why should you, the listener, care? We'll get into all of that and more right after this.
Yeah, you're right. They're not just stopping at the distillate itself. Hempex is really tapping into several key markets. And what I find fascinating is how they're positioning themselves, not just as a supplier, but as a potential partner.
Okay, so walk us through it. What kind of products are we talking about here?
Well, for the wellness seeker, for example, they've got a range of tinctures, gummies, and topicals. What's interesting is they're highlighting specific uses, like sleep enhancement and post-workout recovery areas where people are actively looking for natural alternatives.
Yeah, it's true. Those are hot topics in the wellness world right now, so it makes sense that they're honing in on those areas. It seems like they've got their finger on the pulse of what consumers are interested in.
Exactly. And for those who like to take their wellness into their own hands, Hempex offers CBD distillate in a range of quantities, from small batches to get this up to a kilogram.
A kilogram. That's a lot of CBD distillate. You could practically start your own apothecary.
Right. It speaks to their intention to support not just individual consumers, but also businesses, especially with their emphasis on custom formulations.
That's right. We touched on that earlier, but it's worth revisiting.
Yeah, the ability to create bespoke blends tailored to specific needs or desired effects, that's a game changer, especially for businesses wanting to differentiate themselves in a crowded market.
And this is where that broad spectrum focus we discussed earlier really comes into play, right?
Exactly. By fine-tuning the ratios of different cannabinoids and terpenes, they can potentially create products that target specific areas like sleep anxiety or even energy levels.
So it's not just about offering a generic product, it's about understanding the nuances of these different compounds and how they interact. And it sounds like Hempex is really leaning into that.
They are, and I think it's a smart move. The demand for personalized wellness solutions is only growing, and they're positioning themselves at the forefront of that trend within the CBD market.
It's fascinating to see how this industry is evolving, moving beyond just general wellness and into more targeted applications. But for those of us who aren't interested in mixing our own tinctures or crafting custom gummies, what does Hempex's focus on wholesale and large quantities mean?
That's where things get really interesting from a market perspective. Hempex is essentially positioning themselves as a key ingredient supplier, which means they could potentially have a huge influence on the CBD products you see on shelves in the future.
So even if you're not buying directly from Hempex, you might still be experiencing the benefits of their CBD distillate through other brands and products.
Exactly, and that speaks to a larger trend we're seeing with hemp-derived ingredients. They're no longer confined to niche health food stores. They're finding their way into mainstream markets like cosmetics, food, and beverages.
Yeah, it's becoming increasingly common to see things like CBD-infused skincare or even snacks popping up everywhere, and it sounds like companies like Hempex are playing a vital role in making that happen.
Absolutely, and what's even more interesting is they're not just focused on CBD itself. They're also emphasizing these hemp-derived acids, like CBDA and CBGA, positioning themselves as innovators in a rapidly evolving field.
That's right. I remember seeing those terms on their website, but I have to admit they went a bit over my head.
It's understandable they're still relatively unknown compared to CBD, but the research on them is starting to gain traction.
So what are CBDA and CBGA exactly?
Well, think of them like the precursors to CBD and CBG, two other cannabinoids found in the hemp plant. They're essentially the acidic forms that are converted into CBD and CBG through processes like heating or decarboxylation.
So when you see raw hemp products, they likely contain higher levels of these acidic precursors.
Exactly. And while research is still in its early stages, there's growing interest in the potential unique benefits of CBDA and CBGA.
So Hempex could be on to something big here, being early adopters of these lesser-known cannabinoids.
They could be, and that's what I find so fascinating about this whole deep dive. It's not just about understanding CBD distillate in its current form. It's about looking ahead, considering the potential of these lesser-known compounds and what they might mean for the future of wellness.
It seems like we're just scratching the surface of what hemp has to offer. And Hempex, with its focus on innovation and customization, seems to be right there on the cutting edge. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we have to address the elephant in the room. With all this talk about the potential benefits of CBD, CBDA, and CBGA, it's easy to get swept up in the excitement.
You're right. It's important to remember that, as with any wellness trend, there's a lot of hype out there.
It's true. It's like with any emerging area of wellness, you have to be careful not to get caught up in the marketing hype.
Exactly. And that's why we're here, right?
Yeah,
To cut through the noise and get to the heart of the matter.
absolutely. So with that in mind, what are some key things listeners should keep in mind when navigating the world of hemp-derived products, particularly CBD distillate?
Well, first and foremost, remember that while there's promising research emerging, CBD is not a cure-all.
It's not a magic bullet.
Precisely. And while many people report positive experiences, it's crucial to approach it with realistic expectations.
And to consult with a healthcare professional if you have any underlying health conditions or are taking other medications.
Absolutely, especially since CBD can interact with certain medications.
Safety first, always.
And another key thing is sourcing, which is where a company like Hempex with its emphasis on transparency and quality control, becomes particularly interesting.
Yeah, their website mentions third-party lab testing, which I understand is crucial in this industry.
It is because it provides an extra layer of assurance that what you're getting is actually what it claims to be, both in terms of potency and purity.
So checking for those lab reports is a good rule of thumb.
Definitely, it shows that the company is committed to transparency and accountability.
So to bring it all back to you, our listener, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of CBD distillate to the potential of these lesser-known cannabinoids like CBDA and CBGA. We've explored the different types of CBD distillate, the science behind the entourage effect, and the ways Hempex is innovating in this space. But perhaps the most crucial takeaway is this. Ask questions, do your research, and approach this world with a discerning eye.
And don't be afraid to experiment within reason, of course.
Exactly, because ultimately finding what works best for you is a personal journey.
And who knows, maybe as research continues to unravel the complexities of hemp and its many compounds, we'll look back on this conversation as just the tip of the iceberg.
I have a feeling we've only just begun to scratch the surface. So, until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, stay curious.
And stay informed.